The scent of lilies and fresh-cut grass clung to the air, a nauseatingly perfect perfume for a day that was anything but. I stood in the back of the church, a shadow among the light. My brother Julian stood at the altar, a beacon of golden boy perfection in his tailored suit. His smile was a blinding white, the kind that had always charmed the world, a smile that had promised so much and delivered so little to me. And by his side, draped in lace and ivory, was my future, or what I had thought was my future. Her name was Clara. And her eyes, once holding a universe I thought was mine, were now fixed on Julian. She looked at him with an adoration that I had only ever dreamed of. It was a love I had earned over a decade, a love that Julian had stolen with a few weeks of effortless charm and a well-timed, insincere confession. I had seen it coming, of course. The late-night texts, the secretive glances, the way her laughter changed when she spoke his name. The hints were there, but I, in my naive, idiotic hope, had chosen to ignore them. Because a man doesn't betray his brother. Not like this. Julian caught my eye from the altar. His smile didn't falter. It widened, if anything, a slow, deliberate twist of his lips that was both a triumph and a taunt. I saw the words form before he spoke them, mouthing them silently from across the hallowed space. She loves me more. It was a whisper that screamed across the silence, a final, brutal blow that shattered the last remnants of my dignity. The boy who was supposed to be my other half, the one I had shared a womb with, a bedroom with, a childhood with, had just stolen the love of my life and rubbed my face in the dirt. My heart, a thing I had always thought was strong, a steadfast engine of my existence, felt like a dying bird, beating a frantic, panicked rhythm against my ribs. I wanted to scream, to rage, to tear down the very walls of that sacred place. But I did nothing. I just stood there, my hands clenched into fists in my pockets, and watched my world burn. Our story, like all great tragedies, began long before this day. It started in the shadow of Julian's light. He was the golden child, the firstborn, the one with the easy laugh and the effortless charm. Our parents had doted on him, praising his every small achievement as if it were a monumental feat. He was the one who won the sports awards, the one who effortlessly aced his exams, the one who could talk his way out of any trouble. I, on the other hand, was the quiet one, the bookish one, the one who lived in the background. I was the moon to his sun, a pale reflection of his brilliance. Growing up, I accepted my role. He was the leader, I was the follower. He was the star, I was the audience. We were a team, or so I had always believed. Julian, with his boundless energy, would talk me into our many misadventures, climbing the old oak tree in the backyard, building a fort out of old sheets and blankets, sneaking out at night to watch the stars. I was his accomplice, his silent partner in crime. The unspoken rule was that we looked out for each other. I protected him from our father's anger when he broke something. He protected me from the bullies on the playground. It was a symbiotic relationship, or so I had thought. Even our love lives followed this predictable pattern. Julian was the one who dated the cheerleaders, the popular girls, the ones who seemed to sparkle with an inner light. I dated the quiet, bookish girls, the ones who preferred libraries to parties. Clara was different. She was a breath of fresh air, a whirlwind of vibrant energy and quiet grace. She loved old movies and cheesy romance novels. She laughed easily and was fiercely loyal. I had met her at the local bookstore, my refuge from the overwhelming pressure of my life, a sanctuary of stories that made more sense than my own. She was looking for a specific book, a rare edition of a classic, and I, the self-proclaimed expert, was able to help her find it. Our connection was instant and powerful. We spent hours in cafes talking about everything and nothing. I had never felt so seen, so understood. She wasn't interested in the easy charm of a Julian. She was interested in the quiet depths of me. I had finally found my person, my other half, the one I could build a life with. Then Julian came back into our lives after a 2-year stint abroad. He was a successful architect, a prodigy in his field. He was even more charming, even more brilliant than I remembered. He met Clara at a family dinner, and I saw the shift, the subtle change in the air between them. The way Julian's eyes lingered on her for a fraction too long. The way he would lean in to catch her laughter. I had always trusted him, always believed in our bond, but a cold fear began to seep into my heart. I spoke to him about it, pleading with him to respect our bond. He laughed it off, a dismissive wave of his hand. "Relax, bro," he had said. "She's your girl. I'm just being friendly." I had wanted to believe him. I had to believe him. But the world had a cruel sense of humor, and my faith was a luxury I could no longer afford. The betrayal was a slow-motion car crash, a series of painful, gut-wrenching moments that culminated in the most brutal of all. The secret late-night calls, the sudden and frequent study sessions, the way she'd avoid my gaze. I had confronted her, my voice shaking with a mixture of hope and dread. She had confessed, her eyes filled with a desperate apology that did nothing to soothe the raw, gaping wound in my chest. She told me Julian was more ambitious, more exciting, that he made her feel things I never could. It was a dagger to the heart. And then Julian sealed the deal. He came to me, his face a mask of false sympathy, and told me he had fallen for Clara, and that she, in turn, had fallen for him. He looked at me, our mother's favorite son, and said the words that would haunt me for a lifetime. She loves me more. It was a statement of fact, a simple, brutal truth that he had no qualms in saying. The golden boy had taken my most prized possession, the love of my life, and he had done it with the casual, cruel confidence of a man who had never had to work for anything. My love story had become a footnote in his epic, a minor inconvenience to his grand plan, and for that he would pay. He would pay a price far greater than he could ever imagine. The wedding was not the end of my story. It was the beginning of his downfall. The air in the church was thick with the suffocating scent of victory and betrayal. I had watched Julian and Clara say their vows, a bizarre out-of-body experience where I was both the spectator and the star of my own tragedy. The golden boy had his prize. He had the girl, the family approval, the effortless life. And I, the quiet, ignored brother, had nothing, except for a gnawing, all-consuming hunger for revenge. It was a fire that had been smoldering beneath the surface for years, fueled by a lifetime of being second best, of being overlooked, of living in the shadow of my brother's perfect life. His betrayal of me and Clara had been the spark that finally ignited the inferno. An outside narrator with a cynical sigh would probably comment on the pathetic nature of my existence at this moment. Ah, the classic tale of the spurned lover, the bitter brother, a tired trope, really. One would expect a bit more originality from a man who spent his life lost in the pages of books. But no, he's just another pawn in a game he never chose to play, a victim to the whims of the universe and his golden boy brother. And yet, they would be wrong. This was not the story of a victim. This was the story of a phoenix, a man rising from the ashes of his humiliation, a man who had finally decided to take control of his own narrative. The reception was a cacophony of fake laughter and forced joy. I moved through the crowd like a ghost, a silent observer of a scene I had no place in. My parents, in their blissful ignorance, were gushing about how perfect Julian and Clara were together. My mother, with tears in her eyes, squeezed my arm. "Isn't it wonderful, darling? Your brother is so happy." My father, ever the pragmatist, just clapped Julian on the back, a silent approval that spoke volumes. The whole family was a collective applause for Julian's latest conquest, and there I was, the architect of a plan that would bring it all crashing down. My plan was not a rash, emotional one. I had spent weeks, months, meticulously crafting it. It wasn't about public humiliation or a grand gesture. That would be too simple, too quick. My revenge would be slow, methodical, and painfully precise. It would target the very things Julian held most dear: his reputation, his finances, and his carefully constructed illusion of a perfect life. My years in the shadows, my quiet observation of the world, had given me a unique perspective. I knew Julian's weaknesses. I knew the secrets he had buried, the small lies he had told, the corners he had cut. I had seen him for what he truly was, a fraud in a golden suit, and I had been watching, waiting, and documenting. The first step was a slow, subtle sabotage. Julian's architectural firm was his pride and joy, his monument to his own genius. I had spent hours poring over his past projects, his financial records, and his client list. I had found a few minor inconsistencies, a few misreported figures, a few disgruntled ex-employees who had been silenced with non-disclosure agreements. I had anonymously leaked these small details to a few key industry blogs and forums. The reports were vague, just enough to sow a seed of doubt, to make people question the Golden Boy's impeccable record. "Rumors of financial irregularities at Julian Vance's firm," one headline read. Questions raised about the sourcing of materials for the new city library project. It was a whisper in the wind, a tiny ripple in the vast ocean of his success. But I knew whispers could become shouts, and ripples could become tidal waves. The second part of the plan involved Clara. I knew she was a woman of principle, of integrity. She had been blinded by Julian's charm, but she wasn't a bad person. I had spent a considerable amount of time gathering evidence of Julian's many indiscretions. His late-night meetings with clients that were anything but professional, the expensive gifts he bought for other women, the secretive trips he took with them. I had no doubt he had already cheated on her, even before their wedding day. I had collected it all: text messages, emails, even a few discreet photos. I had created a dossier of his deceit, a comprehensive collection of his lies. But I wouldn't just hand it over to her. No, that would be too easy. I would orchestrate a way for her to find it herself, to have her own moment of painful, brutal clarity. The truth, I had learned, was far more destructive when it was self-discovered. The final piece of the puzzle, the grand finale, was a plan that would bring down not just Julian, but the entire facade of our family. I had discovered a dark secret from our father's past. A financial scandal he had buried decades ago. A web of deceit that had built our family's fortune on a foundation of lies. Julian, with his endless need for success and prestige, had been unknowingly complicit in it. He had taken our father's investments, built his firm with the tainted money, and had unknowingly become an accessory to the crime. I had all the evidence, all the documents, all the proof I needed to expose them both. I would pull back the curtain and show the world the truth of the Vance family. It would be an act of self-destruction. A kamikaze mission that would leave me with nothing. But it would also leave Julian with even less. The night of the wedding reception, I watched him from across the room. His arm wrapped possessively around Clara's waist. He was a king on his throne, surrounded by his subjects. He had everything he had ever wanted. He was loved, he was successful, he was envied. He thought he had won. But he didn't see the storm I was brewing. The quiet, methodical destruction I had been planning. He didn't see the look in my eyes. The cold, calculated fury that had replaced the quiet desperation. He had stolen my happiness, my future, and my love. And for that, I would not just take it back. I would burn his world to the ground and watch him stand in the ashes of his own making. The weeks following the wedding were a strange blend of quiet calm and simmering chaos. Julian, in his newlywed bliss, was oblivious. He was too busy living his perfect life, too self-absorbed to notice the small cracks beginning to appear in his flawless facade. The whispers I had sown in the industry had taken root. Clients were now asking more questions, demanding more detailed reports. His perfect reputation, once a bulletproof shield, had a few small but noticeable dents. He dismissed them as the cost of success, a few disgruntled competitors trying to bring him down. He had no idea it was his own brother, the quiet, unassuming one, who was pulling the strings. An outside narrator might have found the irony delicious. The golden boy, so confident in his invincibility, fails to see the most obvious threat. He's so busy looking at the horizon, he fails to notice the viper in his own garden. It's a tragedy of hubris. A classic case of a man falling victim to his own ego. The venom of this truth was the sweetest part of my revenge. It wasn't just about what I was doing. It was about the fact that he was completely unaware of who was doing it. The next phase of my plan was to plant the seeds of doubt in Clara's mind. She was the final piece of the puzzle, the one who, in her naivete, had become a pawn in our twisted game. I had a feeling she was already starting to notice the subtle inconsistencies in Julian's story. His late nights at the office had become more frequent. His phone was always face down, his voice hushed when he took calls. I had anonymously sent her a series of cryptic messages, hints about his infidelity, enough to make her question his loyalty. A picture of Julian having a private dinner with a stunning client. An overheard phone conversation about a weekend trip to a beach house, the name of a private club where he had been seen with an escort. I didn't send her the full dossier. I wanted her to be the one to open the Pandora's box. The opportunity came at a family dinner, the first one since the wedding. Julian was his usual boisterous self, regaling the table with stories of his latest project. Clara, on the other hand, was quiet, her eyes distant, her smile strained. I saw a tiny crack in her composure and knew it was my moment. I excused myself from the table and went to Julian's study. I had left the dossier on his desk, hidden under a pile of blueprints. I had meticulously edited it, leaving out anything that could be traced back to me, making it look as though it had been an accidental discovery, a forgotten file. I then sent an anonymous text to Clara, a single, simple message, "Check Julian's desk." A few minutes later, I heard a sharp gasp from the other room, followed by a tense silence. The entire family, still lost in their conversation, seemed not to notice. But I saw Julian's face pale. His smile falter as he sensed a shift in the atmosphere. Clara emerged from the study, her face a mask of shock and disgust. She held a stack of papers in her trembling hands, my carefully crafted dossier of Julian's lies. She didn't say a word. She just looked at Julian, her eyes wide with a mixture of heartbreak and fury. Before she walked out of the house, Julian, finally realizing what had happened, jumped up from the table, his face a contorted mess of panic and rage. "Clara! Wait!" he yelled, but she was already gone. The climax of my revenge was still to come, but this was a significant victory. He had lost her. The love he had stolen from me, the one thing he had always seemed to possess so effortlessly, was now gone. But I wasn't finished. I was just getting started. The final act was the big one. The one that would bring the house of cards I was standing in down. I had meticulously timed the release of the documents about our father's financial crimes. I had found a journalist who was known for her integrity and her fearless pursuit of the truth. And I had sent her an anonymous tip, along with all the evidence I had collected. The article was set to be published the next morning, a few days after Julian had lost Clara. It would expose not just our father's long-buried crimes, but also Julian's unknowing complicity in them. He would not just lose his wife and his reputation. He would lose his company, his family name, and the very foundation of his golden boy life. The next day, I watched the news unfold from a cafe across town. The headline of the article was a dagger to the heart of the Vance family. The Golden Son and a Dark Legacy. How the Vance fortune was built on a house of cards. It detailed the financial scandal from decades ago, the web of deceit, and Julian's unwitting use of the tainted funds to build his empire. The article painted him as a fraud, a man who had built his success on his father's crimes. I watched as his face appeared on the television screen, his once perfect smile replaced with a look of stunned disbelief. The calls started pouring in, his clients, his partners, his friends, all abandoning him as the truth came to light. The media swarmed our family home, their cameras and microphones a testament to our downfall. I had done it. I had burned Julian's world to the ground. I had taken everything he had stolen from me, and then some. I had avenged my love, my dignity, and my lost future. I had become the villain in his story, a dark mirror of his golden perfection. I should have felt victorious, elated. But as I watched him on the screen, a broken man, a hollow shell of his former self, a strange emptiness began to fill my chest. He had paid for his crimes. He had lost everything, but so had I. My family was in ruins. Our name was dragged through the mud, and my own hands were sullied with the blood of my revenge. I was no longer the quiet, unassuming brother. I was the architect of my family's destruction. I was a man who had traded his morality for a moment of vindictive pleasure. The revenge had been sweet, a glorious release of all the anger and bitterness I had been holding for so long. But the aftertaste was bitter, a hollow ache that nothing could fill. I had won the game, but I had lost everything in the process. I had become just like Julian, a man consumed by his own ambition, a man who had destroyed his own world in the pursuit of his desires. The golden boy had lost his shine, but I had lost my soul.